So welcome to this short overview about Agile Cloud Data Warehousing with Microsoft Fabric. My name is Peter Bellis. I'm working for Datavault Builder since 2010. I'm working in the data warehousing scene since the year 2000. I've seen many different designs, and I always like if we have some new concepts, we're going to the cloud. We got into this OneLake concept by Microsoft. And we see a lot of potential, and this is why we started supporting Microsoft Fabric. And I will show you how this exactly works. I will try to show you a live demo. I did that yesterday. I did this Monday. I did it 5 minutes ago, and 5 minutes ago, we had some little bit problems on Fabric with the synchronization of the different layers with Power BI, but we will see, I hope, in a few more minutes when I've presented the high-level concept that we can go into the details and really see how it works. But for sure, I can show you how it works generally at the database level, and then maybe we will create as well a Power BI report. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. Just please type in your question when you have it. I will check from time to time and decide if I will answer the questions in between or at the end, but type them as you have them. So what is the main thing that we're doing here? And it's about the business value of your data. And business value can be important point to take the right decisions, to either increase revenue or reduce costs. It can prevent fraud, the main reason to prevent fraud, or you want to reduce risk or fulfill the legal requirements. And OneLake will store your data, but how do you get from having the data available to give it in a meaning? And what we do is here that we try to bring meaning to your data. And the Datavault Builder's data warehouse automation tool, it will help you to do the right thing. So work agile, do really the tasks that will help your business to take the right decisions, do things right using automation, and deliver very early on to profit from the data that you have. And this will increase your business value, and it will prevent that your project gets stopped. And especially if you go into a new technology like Microsoft Fabric, people will ask you, when can you deliver? When can you show me something? When do we have something operational? When can we hand it over into a daily process? And this is the main thing. If we can't deliver this very early on, we will hit a wall and the project might get canceled. So how can we help you to do these things in a very early step? And what are we doing is that if you have already Microsoft Fabric or another data lake technology, your data is there, and that's good. But if you have different reports, all of the reports need to find out how the data matches together and how you can use it to generate your insights. If we replace these connections between all the elements with a central data hub, it reduces complexity, it will document everything what we need. But this creating of the central data hub is not that simple. And this is what the Datavault Builder helps you on top of Microsoft Fabric. So what do we need to do? We need to build our main infrastructure where we'll store the data. We need to connect to our data sources, bring the data in, and start storing it. And yes, staging the data here, connecting the sources, this is something that we can use already like ADF and other technologies. I will highlight that a little bit later. Then we store it, we create history, we need to join the data together from many different data sources, check on the quality, document how the data belongs together. And we want to publish that. We want to create that as well as a semantic model to show what we've got, that people can start consuming it and don't need to ask us if we already prepared something. But that's not everything. We need to grant access to the different levels. We need to present it in a way that it's very simple to query. We need to show data lineage for all the data that we generated. Data governance is more and more of a topic. So where do we have sensitive data, where we have risk data? And we need to log what we are doing daily. And somebody needs to run the whole thing and see what happens if something gets wrong. And more problems pop up if you try to sort this out manually. So to do all this integrated data store, we use the Datavault Builder. And the Datavault Builder takes all the functionality that is the same for all the companies, bring the data together, creating history, making it available to your consumers, document everything we have done, and separates it from what is specific for your company. You will have different data sources, you will have different data processes than other companies, and this you can configure on top of the Datavault Builder using a visual data model. Now, how does this interact with Fabric? Everything what we do is being stored in OneLake. All the different layers that I will show you later is always interacting with this one shared data layer. And if you're finished and we want to present the data, we can access it directly with Power BI. We can access it with our data science tools. And the nice thing is the Datavault Builder doesn't need to be running at that moment in time, because after every step that we do, everything is persisted down here to the OneLake layer. And you could use as well and integrate it using Data Factory. So you could stage your data if you want to use Data Factory with Data Factory. If you want to use the built-in connectors, that's fine as well. And we do all the processing in between. We give it a meaning. We do the documentation. We show the data lineage for you. And what are the advantages of using the Datavault Builder? It will speed up your process massively by two things. One is automation. Yes, we are converting your conceptual data models into working code right away, but as well by standardization. The Datavault Builder comes along with all many predefined settings, with best practices, how to work with that, and this will help you to succeed your first project in a very short time. Datavault Builder is used by very small clients with data teams of 2 people, but as well by very big companies where you have like 40 different developers. You need to do distributed development where different features are developed in parallel, where you have a lot of data, millions and billions of rows of being processed. And this is what we covered. So the tool itself helps you give business meaning, convert it into technical working concepts, and it can be used as well for distributed development. And how does this look like? And I will show you in the live demo all of this part, but as a high-level explanation, we start with a data model, and the data model is not a Datavault data model, it's a conceptual and a logical data model. So you will create core business concepts there, the blue boxes, you will create relations, and we will group this into subject areas. We can group this into data domains, capture metadata, like data ownership, stuff like that. Don't worry if you don't know about Datavault modeling. As long as you know generally about data modeling, you will be fine. And if not, there is a guided training that helps you understanding what we're doing. And this will involve the business users very early on. They can really describe what are the main processes they want to take decision about. It will, let me check the questions. It will give them insight what the IT is doing. And the nice thing, we will see that at the end, hopefully, it will give them the finished implementations right away, if requested as well, including the metadata directly in Power BI. On the IT side, it will help you by implementing all these data models in real time in the database, which will be then stored into the OneLake. And it speeds you up by allowing you to work directly in the model with the data that we like to process. Let me check the questions for 1 second. One question is if you use a native tool for ingestion. Not yet. What we offer is that we pick up data ingested with other means like ADF, and we take something called like a ELT load. So we take it from OneLake and don't need to move it around through any ETL tools and can process it in the Data Vault. Or we have our built-in connectors that use JDB's technology for most of the cases, but they can as well connect directly to data sources using other technologies like through Trino, like to Kafka streams, or special application connectors like for Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. The other question I need to answer at the end, because it's more detailed to understand what exactly the question is. So let's have a look at the basic process. The first thing is what we do is that we start with the data model. And I will import your existing data model by default created on Postgres, but as this is a business model and not a technical model, I can import it here as well directly into Fabric, and it will create the Fabric specific structures below. So it will not use the data types used by Postgres, it will use the data types used here and create all my structures. I can show you what happens if I change it. We can look at the database level, because in real time, this data model will be converted directly here to a physical implementation. Step 2 is we will use our connectors, and I will use here our own CSV connector to stage some data. Step 3 is we could preview the data, have a look on how it looks like in the tool, and then we will connect the data with the data model. And I will use today a little bit a shortened version, because it's not about the Datavault Builder generally, that this works on all the databases that we support the same, but we want to look more on what's happening back at the OneLake level, at the Fabric level. Then we will create an output interface, and at the rule level, I will use a feature that we have already built in as well for the other databases called materialization. By that, it will, instead of a view on our process, which is a virtual processing, create really a table, load the table with data, and this is what then will be available directly in OneLake, accessible by Power BI, hopefully. So if you look again on this picture, then we will go from data model to staging the end. Everything will be managed and at the bottom stored in OneLake. Just that you understand a little bit, even the demo looks very simple. What is behind it? We have for the data storage, for the data absorption level, we connect to the data sources. You can understand the data associated with the data model and store it in the raw and business vault. And this is split from consuming the data, because here we can create many different interfaces. This could be normal, third normal form, it could be dimensional model, it could be flat tables, and here we can create directly on top of our data semantic models that can be consumed by Power BI. You have as well the chance to apply business logic in here. And for the development process, it will support you with data modeling, data profiling. It helps you to automate your infrastructure setup. It will generate the code. It will help you in deploying your model changes between different environments. It will support you in testing by offering all the REST APIs. It has REST APIs as well for CI/CD if you want to use Azure DevOps and similar. It will cover as well operations. It has a built-in scheduler. Yes, you could use ADF as your main scheduler and implement as well our jobs, but it has a scheduler on its own for job chaining and everything. We can show you how to achieve high availability. It has ETL and ELT built in, ETL directly connecting to the data sources, and ELT if you use something like ADF already for staging. It will create in parallel documentation and data lineage. For code versioning, we use a built-in Git client, so these data models are optimized to be stored directly on a Git branch. One question that will be very nice is that we will see in the demo is how automate this raw vault and the business vault creation. Everything is visual here, and we will see how this works in the demo. And I would say, let's start with that. So before I start, I will reset my whole environment. But before I do that, I show you what my current status is in case that any of the Fabric functionality wouldn't be available in the next few minutes. But I have a data model, and in the background, if I switch here to my database, we have here different schemas, and in the Datavault schema, we see here the tables, which are the physical implementation of our conceptual and logical data model. So here, if I create something like a new hub, I could add here more parameters. I could add here in the data catalog properties. I just skip all of that. I create the objects in the same second. It was created at the fabric level. So I can go and query this table. And by standardization, it knew how many columns there need to be. It knows what the postfixes are, but you can name the objects as you like it in the languages that you like it. And here I go to refresh. And we see directly the elements already created and available here in our console. So let's go back, and just to show you how this generally works in a workflow, I will reset my full sandbox so it's completely empty and start building from scratch. And while it's now removing the data model, in the background, it is removing as well all the elements at the database level. Good. And now I start my use case that I have a new sandbox and I load the data model. I could load it directly from Git. I have prepared here a new local model, but it's based on the data model that I had before, which was prepared for Postgres. And it will now compare the data model that I want to load with my local sandbox, which right now has nothing in it. So it will tell me that everything that is in my data model that I loaded needs to be installed. So I select everything and I deploy it, and we will see how fast that is. And this is really something impressive for a product that knew that it's really, really fast for processing this kind of structure changes. So let's clear it here and let's have a look on how our data model looks like. And this is not the full data model. The full data model can be seen by double-clicking on certain elements, so we can browse through the data model and see what is everything in it. All of the elements, because they were created new, are right now empty. So we could extend the data model by talking to business users, but let's assume that the data model that we have is already fine and we want to implement some data. So let's go to the staging area, and here we can add some new connection. And these are our built-in connectors. Here's a CSV file, or I could take here already if something is already on OneLake, the intra-cross database staging mechanism. Let's take my files. Find it. I skip here all the detail settings. I add the source. And let's select the table. I could do here delta loading. I could connect to CDC streams. I could load more than one change in one batch. I could load bitemporal data. I skip all of that. That's all the same for all the different variants. Maybe while it's loading the data, there's a question why we decided here to go for SQL on Fabric and not for the data warehouse edition. We were missing there really some options to manipulate the data, to validate the data, some permission things. So we decided here to use the SQL variant because it works really fast. It's very good to use. And the end effect is really this, what we want to do, and have the output very quick. And we will see that in a second. So in the meantime, it loaded 100,000 records here into my staging table. If I go here to the database level, I can go here to my staging schema, and I will see that the table is already created here and loaded with data. If I select the right table, So we can go into the next step and visualize what we just loaded. Maybe let's take the carrier. Let's have a look at the value distribution, and all of these queries that we see here are in the background fired directly against the fabric data. So now we can take the data and map it here to our hub. And here we will take the business key. And somebody told us that the business key is like the flight number in combination with the date, because the same flight number is repeated on different dates. Let's check that. And it's checking directly against Fabric if this is really unique. Answers are quite fast, so we're very happy here. And we see no. The same business key has different entries for different carriers. And if we go back here with this information to the business user, he will explain us, yes, that's code sharing. So let's do that and validate directly what the business key could be. And we have one more case where we need to add here the airport of origin until we're very happy. Again, I skip all the options like for prefixing the business keys, and I'm skipping the step of manually splitting up my data into satellites. I just say for first version, that's perfectly fine. Take all the columns, throw them into one satellite. And right now we have for the raw vault a production ready implementation. So we can start loading the hub. And because the layers are integrated, it knows that it needs to go back. It needs to change the table in the staging area to include a column for the business key and hash key pre-calculation, reprocesses the data, loads it, and we have the loaded hub. The same goes for the satellite. And here we have only the conceptual view. So we don't see the technical implementation. We don't see any specific indexes that we create. We don't see all the checks for uniqueness and everything that we do at the technical level, because here I have just a description what shall be loaded. It will be historized. If it's temporal data, it will use already bitemporal historization while loading the satellite. And everything is done, including optimization for the as of now queries, and the data is here. But nobody can access it. We did right now the data absorption part, but we haven't prepared yet the semantic model for consumption. So yes, data lineage was updated. Operations is ready. We can load all these jobs and everything. We can have a look at the documentation, but we need to make this data consumable. And I will do something special, and I will not explain it into detail so that we can show more in the Power BI report. I will as well implement here the link to the airline. And I will load a second data source and the second system for loading my metadata. So I get a list of airlines. Let's stage that. And let's add this here as well, the airline hub. So now we have already, after this step, integration of two different sources. And just to show something different, I can say that I want to load this raw vault system. And if it is finished, it shall trigger as well the reload of the master data. And now we have already two sources going into the raw vault, but still we have no consumption layer. But we will do this in the next step. So let's go here to the dimensional model, and now we can visually select what we want to output. So I create here a new object, one for the airline. And I selected I want to do it as of now. I don't want to load the history yet. I could output that later. It's already stored, but we will not output it yet. So let's go here description, rename that as airline name. And we have our first dimension ready. It's not maybe perfect, but it's a first version that we can use, and already we can convert now the airline ID into the airline name. So what I get here is the preview of the output. It's not loaded yet. This looks good. And to publish it here, I will materialize it, and by that it's getting synced back to OneLake. And it will be accessible now through Power BI. Now, but we need to have our as well our fact table. So let's create here a new object for flight. And as in my data model, somebody already prepared the output interface. I can just use our automatic mapping. Oops. Yeah, it works that way. And maybe let's rename this. And important that Power BI is able to connect to our airline. I'm going here as well to the airline object, and I will include here the business key for the hub airline. Let's preview our output. And we see here the business key for the hub airline is empty. So something was not loaded yet. And in my second interface, it did work. I need to check later on why this one load couldn't complete at the database level. So we have now already prepared some outputs, and I have two tables materialized. One is the one for the flights, and the other one is the one for the airline. I just checked that I have everything in here that I want to have here. I don't have the link to the airline yet. So let's add this as well here. Okay. So now let's extend this other interface with the link to the airline. And now let's recreate the materialization with the new column definition. Good. So let's switch back here to Fabric. And what I do here, I go here into my endpoint, analytics endpoint, I go to reporting, and I don't have the permissions to change existing stuff. So I just say I will create a new semantic model, which I can publish to Power BI. You could use here whatever reporting analytics tool you want to use. The main thing is that the first part is that we think about how our data is related, that we connect to the stages or use already stage data, that we can visually create here a business output interface. We can add later on here business rules. It documents data lineage, makes it ready for operation, and writes here as well the documentation for you and makes it ready to be deployed. So I could go in here, select that I want to compare this to my Git repository, select my branch, and it will now does the diff between my local work environment and tells me that I have no permission, okay, and show you what exactly the differences are. I can simulate that here by comparing it to my file that I had before. And it should show me now exactly the changes that we have done in between. And it tells us like, create this new source system that I was creating, create a new hub that I was creating in the uploads. And I could say that I want to maybe just deploy my interface that I did. And it will tell me, no, you shouldn't deploy only this one interface to the next environment because it would not work. You need to include all these dependencies. Next step would be then to just take the tables that we created, publish it as semantic layer, go into Power BI, and you can report really within seconds. Good. I thank you a lot. And if there are any specific questions, don't hesitate to contact us to as well request a personal presentation where we can show exactly what you want to see if you have some special challenges in your data and discuss as well more detailed questions if they come up. Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot and see you.